Over the years, I've seen dozens of comments across social media claiming that some games get better when you turn off the HUD. I've been curious about this idea, but never given it a proper try. Until now. Oh, hell yeah. I spent a whole week playing video games with almost zero on-screen information, testing a different game each day. And in this video, I'm gonna take you through my journey, which in some fundamental ways has caused me to reevaluate how I approach playing games. I decided to kick off this experiment with a genre that I didn't think would work at all with no HUD, and that is first-person shooters. While I wait for Battlefield 6, I've been dipping back into BF 2042, so I thought that might be an interesting game to start with. After spending some time examining the default setup, I jumped into the settings menu to see how much I could turn off, and lucky for us, 2042 has a master toggle for the entire HUD. The difference was remarkable at first. Stripping away the UI elements completely changed how the game looked to me. It suddenly felt like I was in a hardcore military simulation instead of a casual multiplayer shooter. As I took in my surroundings, one thing became clear within seconds. I had zero fucking clue who to shoot. Thanks to the incredibly bland factions in this game, which are both faceless private military groups, relying on cosmetic features to ID soldiers turns out to be pretty tough. After panic spraying at every player in my field of view, it did strike me how much more tense and realistic the experience became without the layers of on-screen information annotating the battlefield. That challenge of enemy identification, combined with the lack of any hit marker for my shots, had turned this game into a brutal gauntlet. But I gotta say, when I did manage to score a kill, it felt pretty good. Yes! Let's go! Wow. A lot of the other HUD elements, I didn't find myself missing that much. The minimap, weapon info, health bar, those are all things I could definitely play without in most situations. I looked through the settings one more time to see if I could find a way to just turn on the player markers, but I couldn't figure it out. If anyone knows how to do that, I would appreciate a comment. To me, that's the one piece of information I think I do need in this game to make it playable. But otherwise, I was surprised at how much I could live without and how different and exciting it made the game. On day 2, I booted up Tears of the Kingdom, and I had higher hopes for this one. A while back, I had captured some gameplay footage with the HUD disabled, and I remember thinking that it could be a really cool way to experience the game. And it might be if Nintendo actually let you do it. Sadly, there's no option to fully disable the HUD in this game. What they have instead is a Pro option, which is basically a minimal version that dynamically shows info based on the situation. So better than nothing. In this mode, the HUD is fully hidden when walking around exploring the world, and man, does that make you appreciate the beauty of this game. You just don't get this feeling. You don't get this feeling with crap on the screen. There were so many times when I just had to stop to admire the pastel vistas and soak in that somewhat melancholy ambiance of Hyrule. Outside of the aesthetic upgrade, the biggest gameplay change for me was not having a minimap on screen. I don't think I relied on the minimap a ton during my original playthrough, but without it, I found myself more curious to explore, to look just beyond a hill, or to jump down into a valley and see what's at the bottom. As for combat, even though I was rusty, the health bar briefly flashes when you get hit, so at least I knew when it was time to retreat and heal up. If anything, I would say that Nintendo didn't quite go far enough with this HUD setting. There's no way to hide your stamina wheel or your Zonai battery gauge from showing while you're using them, and I think that's a loss. I would have much preferred if those gauges stayed hidden until they were running low. That being said, I can't think of a strong reason not to play the game with the Pro HUD, assuming that you have some familiarity with the controls and game systems already. Not only does it amplify the scenery, but I think it encourages more natural navigation of the open world. On the third day, I revisited a game that I have a lot of mixed feelings about. Monster Hunter Wilds was my most anticipated game of this year, and while I enjoyed a lot of the early game, the longer I spent with it, the more I started to resent how streamlined Capcom had made this entry. That's why I was excited to include it in this experiment, to see if playing without the HUD would recapture some of that satisfying struggle that makes Monster Hunter feel so rewarding. Credit to Capcom, this game lets you turn off basically everything, with one notable exception being the focus mode reticle, which unfortunately I couldn't figure out how to hide. But as soon as I applied the changes, I caught myself smiling. Oh yeah. Okay, this is something. Here we go. Wow. I don't think I realized just how much data the game throws at you by default. Without it, these intricate environments and ecosystems literally come to life. As I walked through the flooded forest, I found myself in awe at schools of fish that reacted to my vibrations, at little crabs that disguise themselves as plants when danger approaches.
Wait, the crabs have plants on them? That's sick.
Wait, I've just never paid attention to this stuff. But of course, this game is not called Ecosystem Admirer. It's called Monster Hunter, and for perhaps the first time in all of my hours with this game, I actually felt the tension of the hunt. With no health bar and no damage numbers, all I could do was dodge, block, and strike back, hoping that I would eventually outlast my opponent. It was such a refreshing experience to walk through the interconnected world with no specific objective, encounter a monster organically, and then overcome it after a lengthy duel. That is what Monster Hunter is about. Yeah, I died a bunch of times because I had no idea when my health was low, and I totally forgot to sharpen my weapon for like an hour, but who cares? I was so engaged that it felt like a completely different game, a game that I had always wanted it to be. Next up, a classic, and still my all-time favorite open-world RPG. This was actually my first time playing The Witcher 3 on the next-gen update they released a couple years ago, and oh man, am I tempted to do a full replay now. Years ago, I remember watching a video with CDPR developers where one of them talked about how his favorite way to play this game was with no minimap. Back then, I don't think I took that idea seriously. But at this point in my life, I'm ready to give it a shot. And it's not just the minimap we're disabling, we're going full send. Even though I've spent hundreds of hours in this world, seeing it unobstructed like this brought back a flood of emotions, and with them, a yearning to explore. It didn't take long to understand what that developer had meant. Just like my Zelda experience, not having a minimap or any active waypoint tickled my brain's natural curiosity. And the only way for it to satiate that curiosity, to learn more about the environment I was in, was to physically survey my surroundings. Each discovery I made felt genuinely exciting, like when I stumbled on this note that hinted at a treasure chest sunken on the bottom of the lake. I was worried that playing with no HUD would make it impossible to do quests, but after loading my 4-year-old save and finishing out this journey to slay an ice giant, I have a lot more confidence that it's probably doable in many cases. Similar to Monster Hunter, fighting enemies without any on-screen info resulted in much more engaging combat overall. In fact, I was getting my ass handed to me by a particularly resilient wyvern, and it honestly started to feel like a hunt because I had no sense of how much health it had left. But after about a dozen attempts, I began to get worried, and that's when I realized you can see the enemy info for a split second when pulling up the radial menu.
Oh my gosh. It's level 34. No wonder I can't kill it.
So yeah, this fucker was like double my level. Despite that one inconvenience, I finished this day feeling truly invigorated from the HUDless experience in The Witcher 3. Doing another playthrough has been on my mind for a while, but now it's so clear to me that this is how I should do it. 10 out of 10 would recommend. On the 5th day, I loaded up the 5th entry in Forza's open world racing series. Horizon 5 is set in the colorful and varied landscape of Mexico, making it a great candidate for our HUDless experiment. To this game's credit, the default setup is pretty clean already. Most of the information is coming from your speedometer on the right and the minimap/GPS on the left. During races, you'll also see some status indicators in the top corners. But overall, it's clear the developers wanted players to appreciate the visuals in this world. So let's see how much more we appreciate when we hide everything else. The first 10 seconds going no HUD were really promising, but then I did notice that even without the HUD turned on, the game still force-fed me some information. Specifically, when you pass by points of interest or race events, the game overlays that marker on top of the world, which definitely broke my immersion a bit. The other thing which annoyed me more was the fact that I couldn't figure out any way to turn off the skill point notifications that pop up constantly in the center of the screen. Outside of those critiques, I was actually having a lot of fun driving around and racing. Not only were the landscapes popping, but for some reason the roaring sound of my car's engine felt even more full and convincing than before. After testing the third-person camera view for a bit, I ran into another minor quality of life challenge, which was that driving in manual with no tachometer on screen was a lot harder than I thought it would be, because I was relying solely on the engine noise to tell me when it was redlining. I decided to switch into the cockpit view and found this to be even more engaging, especially during races. All the info I needed was realistically integrated into the dashboard of my car, and racing like this just felt super cool and immersive. If you've never played a racing game this way, I would definitely recommend checking it out. Next up was a game I check in on at least annually, since Hello Games continues to add really awesome free updates to it. No Man's Sky has exploration at its very core, but I wondered how functional it would become if we stripped away all the data readouts. The standard HUD experience in this game is actually mostly dynamic. There's a compass at the top which is permanent, but pretty much everything else, your health, weapon and tool info, environmental data, all of that will stay hidden until there's a reason to display it. Which is conceptually great, although during normal gameplay there is often a reason to show some combination of those things, in addition to persistent tutorial and quest info that likes to hang out in the bottom right. The game also overlays information about materials in your field of view, but unless I'm actively harvesting resources, I usually don't need that to be so prominent. So how did things go when I disabled the HUD completely? Well, the very first thing I did was hop in my ship and start flying around the universe. This definitely delivered on my expectations. Journeying from planet to planet is something that no game captures quite like this one, and experiencing that in its most raw form was incredible. I even found myself in a dogfight with some space pirates, but I was fearing another Witcher 3 situation until I remembered that I just needed to hold the left trigger to lock on to enemies. Walking off my ship and stepping foot on a brand new world felt truly cinematic. The lack of HUD gave this realism to my sense of exploration. I found myself paying much more attention to the bizarre flora and fauna in front of me instead of the planet metadata and resources I could extract from it. It caused me to slow down and spend much more time on each planet before I felt the desire to move on to the next. I realized when I was reviewing my footage that I didn't experience any ground combat without the HUD, but given how simple the mechanics are, I assume combat would work just fine without the reticle. All in, I'd say this was another win for the HUDless experience. I wanted to jump right back in and play more the very next day, but we had one final game to test on our list. I finally got around to Cyberpunk this past year, and despite how long I'd been waiting, It ended up being a great time to jump in, with the game finally in a polished state and the incredible Phantom Liberty DLC adding even more to the experience. Compared to the other CDPR title we've discussed today, the world of Night City feels almost alien. Even with over 40 hours in this game, I still have such a vague sense of where different neighborhoods are and how to navigate the dense layers and winding streets. It's not a city that's meant to be traversed without the help of digital aids like the GPS that I relied on almost exclusively during my playthrough. So what does it mean to explore Night City without these tools, as Geralt or Ciri might have done if they suddenly found themselves transported to this place? Well, something tells me that Witchers wouldn't be super keen on public transit, but after disabling the HUD, it felt like the most natural move was to track down an entrance to the Night City Metro. How do we get to the Metro? That's the goal. Is this the Metro? Where's the freaking Metro? Is that it? Oh, I think maybe that's it. I feel like I'm close to the Metro, maybe. Is that the Metro? That might be the Metro. Hold up. Oh, I think this is the Metro. Yeah. Is it just a pedestrian bridge? Ah, wait, what about this? Is this the Metro? No. Wait, that's the Metro right there. How do I get to the Metro? Oh, it's right here. It's right here. I rarely use the Metro in my playthrough, but damn. Staring out the window, watching the city fly by, just felt so right in that moment. Functionally, I didn't run into much trouble. Combat largely works fine, and I think you can even turn off the damage numbers if you're looking for the purest experience. Hey! Don't do that. I hope those were bad guys. Without some button prompts, it can be unclear which objects you're able to interact with, but I was often able to use my optical scanner to help with that. And as far as quests go, I think wayfinding is really the only challenge, especially in missions where you need to drive to a destination. At one point, I had to steal a car and ship it across town while a bunch of dudes were chasing me, and it felt a little immersion breaking to be pausing the game to check directions every few turns. My wish would have been for the devs to embed a nav system in every car dashboard so that you could look at it while in cockpit view, but I know that's a pretty niche request. This was already one of my favorite video game worlds, but experiencing it in this pure form, allowing myself to wander into fascinating corners of town I had never explored before, I could feel Night City pulling me back in. I want to wrap up with some final thoughts on this experiment. As a gamer in my 30s, I'm definitely guilty of having certain tendencies and routines when it comes to playing games. But this week of HUD-less gaming felt like a breath of crisp Skellige air. When I was imagining playing games like this, I did expect the level of immersion to increase. And sure enough, in each of the 7 games, I can say that I felt materially more present in those worlds. What I didn't predict were all the secondary effects of that immersion. Playing a game without important info displayed on your screen introduces some friction to the experience. You will get confused, you will get lost. But in nearly every instance over this past week, that friction led to gameplay moments that were more interesting and exciting and satisfying than what I was used to. Many of those moments followed after I had relinquished myself to the game's environment, instead of always trying to optimize my path through it. With no map marker or waypoints telling me exactly where to go, it was curiosity alone that drove my movement. This made discoveries feel rewarding, but more importantly, it exposed new parts of the game to me. Parts that I easily could have missed had I been focused on a quest marker. Some of these areas had activities, side missions, or loot to collect, but many of them had no mechanical function at all. They were just cool or weird or beautiful places to look at. And that is what will stay with me the most from this experiment. Getting rid of the HUD isn't just a hardcore way to play a game. It's a way to embed yourself more intimately within the virtual space that you're inhabiting. And once embedded, you can better appreciate everything that virtual space has to show you. Thank you guys for watching. I really enjoyed putting this video together, and I hope this has inspired you to do your own HUD experimentation. If there's a game you're thinking about right now that you might want to try without the HUD, leave a comment below to let me know what it is. I'd be really curious to see. As always, if you learned something or you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like on the way out. And I'll see you guys in the next one.